Marvel has always been known for its amazing stories and even better characters, but it wasn't until the current phase of the MCU that the characters got the love they deserved. The thing is, when you have a massive 10-year-long franchise, you can't always give every character the same attention that the other characters get. Without further ado, let's jump into some of the worst and best character transformations in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One of our worst transformations is Thor. Thor has taken many journeys around the universe, through time and even to godly weapons throughout his time in the MCU. From earthly human love to brotherly love in Sakaar, Thor has always been fighting his entire life. With this lifestyle comes rigorous training and exercise. But what happens when your entire drive to be a fighter is snapped away in an instant? You play Fortnite and you drink beer, obviously. So Thor changed from a physically and mentally fit man to putting on a little weight and refusing to lead his people. This is drastically different from Thor in any other previous movies. It's laughable, but also worrisome. While Thor still retained his humor to a degree, when we met him again in Endgame, he was truly a shell of his former self. Thor became a liability to the Avengers, but was determined to right a wrong he felt responsible for, so they took the risk. It ended up okay, of course, but most importantly, it helped Thor realize himself. It took being the best, being a hermit, then traveling back through time, but he eventually did it. It's not ideal to end on the note that Marvel did, but here we are with Thor, the god of carbs. Drax is a character that is both a brick wall and an enigmatic comedy powerhouse, but that still seems to be his entire character. Drax was introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy, and he quickly became a fan favorite. Many of his lines provided much-needed comic relief in intense scenes, but he also provided the team with great action scenes. Marvel set Drax up from the start to have an incredible story. His family was killed by Ronan the Accuser, and throughout the movie, he goes out of his way to exact brutal revenge. Drax never got the intimate revenge he wanted, though, even though Ronan still dies. He eventually takes his anger and turns it entirely into humor. We love it, but it isn't much of a transformation. Because he was also snapped into oblivion for 5 years before a triumphant return, he wasn't even with the Avengers when they cut Thanos' head off. If Marvel wanted to develop a better transformation, maybe he could have been part of the 50% that were spared and got revenge that way. That being said, with or without revenge, Drax did transform away from anger and revenge to humor and openness, which we really enjoyed. Pietro Maximoff, better known as Quicksilver, was a short-lived character in the MCU. You can thank Ultron for that one, but it doesn't mean we didn't want more. His twin sister Wanda Maximoff, or the Scarlet Witch, survived Age of Ultron. She is an amazing transformative arc because she got to appear in more movies and grow as a person. Quicksilver's transformation from villain to ally was almost non-existent. This is why he's ranked so low on this list of transformations. We find out along the way that Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch were made to be weapons against the Avengers by Hydra. Quicksilver fulfills these duties until Wanda asks for mercy on Tony Stark because of a vision she had. His transformation is short-lived in many ways. He was just getting the hang of his powers, beginning to become part of a team, and seeing the world in a larger way, but that all changed when the Avengers came. Before his death, he works to save hundreds of thousands of people from his home country. We get a little bit of this amazing transformation and just wish there had been more. Clint Barton has been part of the MCU since the first Thor, though only briefly. Since then, he played key roles in each of the major Avengers movies. He was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. brought on by the infamous Nick Fury. He's also best known for his marksmanship and his family. The only Avenger with a strong family unit until Endgame, he was constantly in and out, going between saving the world and being a dad. So what transformation are we talking about for Hawkeye? Of course, we're talking about Hawkeye losing his entire family to Thanos' snap, which sent him on a serial killing spree. Like Lang, he was targeting bad people, but he was still taking lives. Longtime friend Black Widow helps bring him back to the team when they find out about the time heist. He helps bring back his family and all seems well, which leads us to the second transformation, the non-transformation. We get so little about Hawkeye besides fighting scenes and his love for his family and Black Widow. It's too difficult to show a transformation with Hawkeye. Even though he was an essential and founding member of the Avengers, there just isn't enough. Scott Lang became Ant-Man by happenstance. He was a skilled engineer and practiced con man, and luckily for him, the first house he broke into after getting out of jail was Hank Pym's. Hank watched all of Lang's breaking in and chose him to wear the suit. We want to say the rest is history, but it's more complicated than that. He does eventually bring the essential information that makes time travel possible to the Avengers in order to reverse the events of Infinity War after all. So what about Ant-Man and his transformation got him so low on this list of transformations? Well, let's get into it. He has 2 movies of his own and technically a lot of screen time, but it's very much shared with Hank Pym or Hope Van Dyne. It seems just to be his personality, but most of what he says is funny. He often plays sidekick and does disappear for 5 years. For those 5 years he's in the quantum realm, he learns everything needed to make a strong case for time heists. But even that information quickly centers on Tony Stark in Endgame. Ant-Man saves the world, but how he got there is more informational than transformative. You'd think the quantum realm would do a little bit more to a guy. T'Challa takes over the throne as role of Black Panther after his father's untimely death. We start with this event because it's the beginning of his transformation. T'Challa was very close with his father and, based on the events from the Black Panther movie, was still being mentored by him. After his father dies, T'Challa is on a mission to seek revenge from those who played a part in his death. Black Panther picks up where Ultron left off in time, and we see the way T'Challa steps up to be king. Because he didn't feel like his journey with his father was over, he resists the role of king to some extent. During the movie, he moves away from revenge and spite. He's forced by an unknown cousin to confront his beliefs, strength, and resolve. Out of this questioning, he sees goodness in a new way and learns that he could truly make a positive difference in the world. Instead of continuing to keep his people safe, but separate, he takes a risk for the greater good. T'Challa was always a good man, but his transformation lies in his maturity and his greater sense of purpose and self. He owns his role and power in the world and strives to create good. Keep on it, T'Challa. Falcon might be our most interesting inclusion on this list for better and for worse. Sam Wilson, known by his superhero moniker Falcon, was introduced in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. We're quickly brought into his world and his past, and by the end of the movie, the Avengers have a new member. In The Winter Soldier, Cap needs someone to turn to, both for his own personal problems and his superhero duties. Enter Sam Wilson. Sam helps Steve with his demons in a scary new world, and in exchange, Cap gives him his wings back. But unfortunately, Falcon was featured heavily in the MCU, and frankly, he was just a backup character until Endgame. By the end of Endgame, Steve Rogers passes the mantle of Captain America onto Sam with great joy. That's not to say that Falcon was an integral part of the Avengers, but there's only so much one person can do without superpowers or a superhero amount of money like Tony Stark. We're putting Falcon in the middle of our list for just this reason. His transformation from a complete stranger to the new Captain America is welcomed, but unfortunately, we just didn't get to see the Falcon in action that much. Black Widow is a character that has undergone a handful of subtle transformations in the MCU, but her biggest and best took 11 years. We were introduced to Black Widow in Iron Man 2, and right from the start, fans were hungry for more. Over the last decade, Black Widow has popped up in over a third of the movies in the MCU. When she was introduced, she was on a covert operation being held captive, but quickly made it clear that she was the one in control. She never took no for an answer and always found a way to get what she wanted. But after Infinity War, she took her first loss. She and Captain America made sure that what was left of humanity was in good hands. But even in defeat, she handled it well. Before she infiltrated Stark Industries, she was a lone wolf. But 8 movies later, she embraced her new family and did whatever it took to keep them safe, having meetings with others to make sure the world was safe from threats post-snap. Unlike other MCU transformations, her character arc was defined over years and years of movies, thus making it one of our best picks. We enjoyed seeing her on screen, but hope she somehow finds a way back. The beloved Steve Rogers is the first Avenger with America's butt to boot. Captain America's story is a compelling David and Goliath story, except he's both and good. Always the one to jump on a grenade to save others, he represents all that the Avengers stand for. His transformation is much more than just the scrawny man turned superhuman in both strength and size. And it's also more than adjusting from being frozen for 70 years. Captain America seems mostly constant. He always has a soft spot for Bucky and pines after a love he never got to have, and is endlessly affirming, but there is more. Captain America matures and finds purpose. He'll sacrifice himself if he believes in something, but is no longer a martyr. His nationalism becomes humanitarianism, and, in Endgame, he realizes he deserves to live. With the possibility to return to a love at the cost of his present self, he takes the chance. He knows the cause will sustain itself, with or without him, and essentially gives his role in the Avengers to his friends. Captain America's transformation is about being a little more realistic and trusting the world instead of only defending it. It's kinda hard not to shed a tear. Now, this character started as self-absorbed as they get. Dr. Stephen Strange only had to ruin his hands and drop his first name to become a superhero. I guess he also convinced an angry Cape to be friends, but really, Strange changes the trajectory of his life as he's reviewing a case he doesn't want to take because the possibility of failure could ruin a perfect record. On his way to an event he's honored at, driving a $200,000 Lambo. Anyway, in his pursuit to regain prestige and money, he seeks out the Ancient One. There are many times when Dr. Strange could have left Kamartaj, and also could have used his newfound powers to return to his previous life. But in his pursuit of knowledge and mastery of the mystic arts, he saw beyond himself. The Ancient One left protecting the realms to him, and he mastered time with the Time Stone. He trusted himself to give the stone to Thanos, sacrificing himself to keep Tony Stark alive, who ultimately became the key to defeating Thanos. Overall, Doctor Strange proves time and time again that his ego can be wielded in unique and transformative ways. From being a huge jerk to the protector of all, Doctor Strange earns a high spot in our list. Loki is the god of mischief and charmer of fans everywhere. His appearance in the MCU is always welcome, but after a while, his tricks kinda get old. It's like Thor said in Ragnarok, "Dear brother, you're becoming predictable. Life is about change, but you seem to just want to stay the same." When he was introduced in Thor, he was way different than he is now. He was powerful but naive, and afterwards, his antics became more and more petty. His transformation from god of mischief to potential overlord of Earth to defeated and humiliated, and back to his story of redemption, has got us putting him near the top of our list. At the beginning of Infinity War, Loki sacrificed himself in order to potentially defeat Thanos, and this single but quick act had redeemed all of his misdoings in an instant. Even if it might have been a selfish act of self-preservation, Loki was willing to make a sacrifice, and that's good enough for us. Tom Hiddleston has portrayed Loki very well, but we can't help but wonder what kind of things he could have achieved before Infinity War if he had put his passion for conquest aside. We can't give him perfect marks for his sacrifice, but he gets pretty darn close. When Thanos was introduced in 2012 in the mid-credit scene of The Avengers, fans went wild. It should have been fairly obvious to comic book readers that this short tease would go on to spark the Infinity Saga. We wouldn't see Thanos collecting stones until Gamora fought Star-Lord for an Infinity Stone at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy. Until Avengers Infinity War, Thanos was just a name whispered throughout the MCU. We awaited the arc for years, and Thanos' ascent into stardom didn't disappoint. His transformation has to do first with being seen and then with his intentions. Thanos is smart, well-supported, and has been chasing the stones for years. When he had his moment, he wasted no time to thwart the Avengers and carry out his plan. He believes he's doing Earth a favor, helping preserve natural resources. By the time Endgame comes around and present Thanos is killed, we think his transformation is done, but it isn't. When past Thanos and Nebula go to the future to once again get all of the Infinity Stones, his pursuit becomes personal. Thanos began as wanting to do good and ended up vengeful and a pile of dust. That is a huge transformation. The Incredible Hulk has gone from the worst movie in the MCU to being the backbone of the franchise. The 2008 movie The Incredible Hulk was pretty bad, and after replacing most of the actors and retconning almost the entire movie, the Hulk leveled out. Sort of. When he was reintroduced to the Avengers, Bruce had gained control when he goes into the Hulk mode, but struggled keeping the beast at bay. After the Avengers, Bruce and the Hulk went through a handful of transformations that defined his complex character arc. There are a few major steps along the way. He started off in Avengers as having moderate control, but longing for more. Then, finally in Ultron, things hit a peak and he found himself lost in space. Once he crashed on Sakaar, the Hulk had completely overtook Banner, leaving him trapped in the trunk of a speeding car. In Infinity War, Bruce can't seem to reconcile his differences with the Hulk after Thanos made quick work of him. But by the time Endgame rolls around, the two join forces and create the best version of the two possible, Professor Hulk. With all of Hulk's strength and Bruce's brains, the Hulk is topping out as one of our best transformations. It's no surprise that Iron Man almost tops out this list. Tony Stark as Iron Man appears in 10 Marvel movies. But this is no rags to riches stories though. Tony lost his parents very young but inherited a lot, is genuinely brilliant, and was a huge jerk. Before, almost dying from his own weapons, Tony was an entitled playboy with little interest beyond himself. To jump ahead over a decade to his most recent movie, Endgame, we saw an almost unrecognizable person. Iron Man of Endgame is still confident and brilliant, but he's seen the other side. Naturally fitting into fatherhood, he retires his suits for composting. When presented with the idea of a time heist, he says no, thinking of the tiny world he still has, until his transformative goodness kicks in. Knowing how it'll probably end, he agrees to be in on the plan. Some say it's because he still can't get enough of saving the day or being the smartest, but all of the years of fighting for the world changed him. We're so lucky to have seen so much of this transformation. Tony Stark goes down in the MCU as 1 in 14,605,000. The dark horse of Endgame comes in with the best transformation of the MCU, Nebula. We meet Nebula when she's a spiteful, cold, and broken machine person, pitted against her sister who she both loves and hates. She's never been good enough for her villain father Thanos. So what got her at the top of the list, and why is her transformation the best? From hateful to team player, Nebula is one of the few characters in the MCU that knows so much about both sides. She knows her adoptive, abusive father and gives that information to the Avengers. She shoots her past self in order to save her sister. She overcomes a lifetime of gruesome abuse, then to fondly play paper football with Tony Stark and give him her last ration of food. Nebula is an essential key to Endgame, and her character speaks as strongly as Iron Man's. When we first meet Nebula, she's just someone fighting people. She has some fun lines with Gamora and has little free thought. Fast forward several years and she's traveling back through time with a group that should have been her ultimate nemesis to bring back everyone who was lost in the decimation and take out Thanos for good. From a militarized doormat to loving game changer, Nebula deserves the #1 transformation. You can't deny that the MCU has some of the best storytelling in film right now. What do you think of this list? Are there any transformations you don't agree with? Let us know in the comments below and make sure to subscribe to CBR so you can get all the greatest content delivered right to you. Thanks for watching!